leading Texas Tech to the 1993 NCAA championship with an eye.
Swoopes, another long three-pointer. Oh. She got it! Are you kidding me? She's the best player in the WNBA. Guarding Swoopes. Knocks it down, Sheryl Swoopes.
As long as you work hard, believe, and never give up, dreams do come true.
She is always on time.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a treat today. We are here with the legendary Sheryl Swoopes. So, Sheryl, thanks for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, Sheryl, you know, some people may know you now. I know who you are. I watched you play, at least with the Houston Comets. You know, you was a winner. You know, you was an Olympian. But for people who don't know you or know where you come from, could you tell people just a little bit about yourself?
First of all, I don't know who's out there that would know me, but for the sake of your question, just kidding. I started playing ball when I was 7 years old. Grew up, small town, Brownfield, Texas. Grew up playing with my two older brothers. And I knew at an early age that basketball was going to be my, I guess in a way, my saving grace. I knew at such a young age that it was something I really enjoyed doing. There was so much stuff I got out of basketball, from just self-esteem and teaching myself how to be confident in who I am. And it was just a way for me to get out and enjoy competition. And started playing when I was 7 and retired when I was much older than that. But basketball's been a tremendous vehicle for me to be able to travel the world, do some incredible things, and just touch a lot of people.
So who introduced you to basketball?
I started playing with my brothers. So in a way I could say my brothers did, but I think I introduced myself to it, if that makes sense. I knew, like I said, growing up in a small town, there wasn't a lot that we did. There wasn't a lot to do. And my mom was also very strict from the standpoint of she really didn't let me do a lot of things unless I was doing those things with my brothers. And basketball was something that, especially on Sundays after church, it was just basketball all day long. But I knew at 7, when I first picked up a basketball, that there was something special, not necessarily something special about me, but there was something special about that basketball. It didn't really matter where I was, who was around, whether I had a hoop, whether I didn't have a hoop, indoors, outdoors. As long as I had a basketball in my hands, I almost felt invincible. Like whatever I wanted to do, if I had a basketball, I could do it, I could achieve it. So my brothers kind of taught me the game, but I think I kind of introduced myself to it.
Yeah, I remember earlier you was mentioning that, you know, about basketball was helping you with self-confidence. Did you have any kind of issues with some of that growing up, and maybe basketball kind of helped with that?
You know, I think there are a lot of kids growing up today that just deal with a lot of different issues, boys and girls, but especially girls. And for me, it was one thing that basketball just kind of helped me feel confident in myself. And I felt like I was really good at that. So it didn't really matter what people said to me or how people treated me. I used basketball as a way to kind of motivate myself. So growing up, I was not like the most popular. I don't want to say I was bullied, but I had people that kind of picked on me and talked about me, and said that there were just certain things I couldn't do for whatever reason. I was a girl, I was too skinny, or I was too tall, and even the simple thing of just me being black. You know, there were things that I couldn't do because of those things, but I used basketball as a tool for me to be able to show people that it didn't really matter what people said about you, whether they believed in you or not, as long as you believed in yourself, that you could accomplish whatever you wanted to do. And basketball was that vehicle for me.
So you mentioned this is high school when people was kind of picking on you a little bit, correct?
Junior high, high school.
Junior high school.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned about being black. Did it come from like maybe racist people? Or we talking about within our own black community?
I think it was probably a combination. We grew up in a town where it was a very small town, so everybody kind of knew everybody. But I think it was from a standpoint of people knowing my family, knowing my mom, and knowing the struggles that we had growing up. And there was always just negative things, right? If they tried to say, well, you're not going to be successful because you're a girl, and then they understood that that wasn't going to stop me, then there was something else that they would bring up. But I think in my hometown where I grew up, it was majority Hispanics and white. So there were a handful of blacks, but I think because of my race and because there weren't a lot of us that grew up in my hometown, I think that was one thing that people probably looked at and said, well, you're a girl, you're black, you're from a small town, you're never going to be able to be successful. So, but at a young age, I really didn't understand racism. So for me, I really didn't let that affect me. It was just, it is what it is. And I believed in myself and understood that whatever it was I wanted to do, I was going to be able to do. So I just continued to stay focused and stay on that path. And I wasn't going to allow anybody to take me off of it.
All right. So you're dealing with all of that in high school. You was, a great student in high school, correct? I
was a good student. I won't say I was a great student. Okay. I made A's and B's and maybe a C here or there, but high school was a little difficult for me, only because I was so focused on sports. I was so focused on knowing that I had to stay focused because I had a goal. I had dreams. I had things I wanted to achieve, and I couldn't allow anybody, including my friends, to distract me from doing what I wanted to do. And I can remember in high school, one of my closest friends that I played ball with all from junior high through high school, she ended up getting pregnant, sophomore, junior in high school. And then another one of my friends, the same thing happened to her. So I had a lot of people say to me then and say to my mom that the same thing that happened to them was going to happen to me. So when I say it was difficult because they were my friends and I wanted to continue to hang out with them and be friends with them. But my mom kind of was very strict. So my mom had kind of gotten to a point where it was not that she didn't want me to be friends with them, but I couldn't hang out with them anymore. So now I'm trying to find new friends. And as a freshman, I was on the varsity basketball team. And those friends that I had, they weren't playing anymore because they got pregnant. So now I'm finding myself in a place where I really didn't have any friends in high school. I didn't have any friends on the basketball team, and my mom's not letting me be friends with them. So I had to just find a safe space for myself where I could stay focused on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to accomplish, but still continue to be a part of the team.
Right, and I'm hearing you mentioning mom, how strict she was, but were your dad the same?
My dad was not involved in my life. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 3 months old. Okay. So it was just my mom, my 2 older brothers, and myself. And then later my mom had my younger brother, but it was just us. My mom held it down for all of us. So my dad was never a part of my life. And I think that's probably one reason why I was so focused on what I wanted to do to be successful, because growing up in a single parent home, unfortunately, it was very common growing up where I grew up, but I wanted to be different. I wanted my situation to be different, and I wanted to be able to change my mom's life. So
you get to a senior in high school, you start to have people talk to you from colleges, and correct me if I'm wrong, did Texas College or University of Texas try to recruit you first?
So I initially committed to go play at the University of Texas in Austin.
Okay.
And at the time, back then, I won't say the year, because I don't want people knowing my age. Well, I graduated high school in 1989. Okay. So back then, the University of Texas was the UConn of today.
Okay.
So if the University of Texas recruited you to go play ball for the Lady Longhorns, it was like a no-brainer. So when they recruited me, I didn't think twice about it. I didn't talk to anybody about it. It was just, this is where I'm supposed to go. They want me, I'm going. So I signed a letter. I was there for 7 days and decided that it wasn't the best place for me. It wasn't the best fit for me. It's about 8 hours from where I grew up. So I got a little homesick and wanted to go back home. But I knew when I went back home that I would stay closer to home. So I transferred to a junior college, so I didn't have to sit out a year. And I ultimately ended up at Texas Tech and won a championship. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, so when you won the championship, the NCAA championship, how did that feel? Because not too many people win that.
Well, so I had friends that went to other schools and had won championships before, and so I would have a conversation with them and just say, like, how does that feel? And they would always say to me, it feels great, it feels good, but you can't really understand the feeling of it unless it happens to you. So for me, it felt great. Again, going back to when I was 7, I knew that there were things I wanted to achieve in my basketball career. And I also knew there were people that doubted, because I transferred from the University of Texas, that doubted I would ever win a championship regardless of where I went. So to have an opportunity to go to Texas Tech and win a national championship and represent my city and my hometown and my family, it was probably at that time probably the best feeling that I'd ever had, and knowing that, to me, that was just the beginning of my basketball career.
So you won the championship. Now the WNBA is created, and who approached you to be a part of the WNBA?
Well, so there's a couple of steps in between there.
Okay.
So won the championship in 1993. Mm-hmm. I still had a semester of school left to graduate. When we won the championship in 93, I actually went to play basketball overseas.
Okay.
I went to Italy, and I was there for 5-6 months. And then I went back to Texas Tech and I graduated the second semester. So that would have been 90, 94, 95. I graduated. And then the USA national team was established. And this was the first year that they actually put together a national team that would train together, we would play together, we would live together in Colorado Springs for a year. So that was 94, 95, the national team was together. And 96 was the first Olympics in Atlanta, but that national team, and so that was like a pool of players. Mm-hmm. I don't know the exact number, but that was a pool of players that they would ultimately pick the Olympic team from. So because I was a part of that pool, and we trained together for that entire year in preparation for the 96 Olympics, I honestly was very shocked when I made that team. And not because I didn't think I was good enough, but because there was so much talent around. And that had always been a dream of mine, was to someday play in the Olympics. Because that was really the first time I ever realized that women played basketball. Because I never really saw women play basketball on television. So for me to be a part of that team in 95, 96, and to see one of my goals and dreams that I had as a little kid come to fruition was, it was unbelievable for me, because I look back at where I came from and how I grew up in my childhood and all the obstacles that I had along the way, and to be a part of something that was so special on such a huge level, and to have my family be there and celebrate that moment with me was definitely very special to me.
So in 96, this team is when you won the gold medal, correct?
Yes, 96 was my first Olympics in Atlanta.
And how did that feel? Like, say, you get picked to this team, you really didn't think you probably would have been a part of that, and then now you're on a podium with a gold medal.
Well, for me, the reason why that was so special is because I had tried out for a couple of other, not Olympic teams, but some of the other junior teams before that, and I actually got cut. I didn't make the team probably 2 or 3 years when I tried out. But I was so determined to keep going, and at some point that was my goal. I'm going to represent my country and play in the Olympics. So when 96 rolls around and I'm able to play in the Olympics, and we're playing in Atlanta, and there was so much excitement, but I also felt like we all felt like there was so much pressure on us to win a gold medal, but also to play well and to represent women well, because we understood there was an opportunity that there could possibly be a women's professional basketball league here in the States. And not that anyone came to us and said, listen, you guys have to win, you got to be successful if this is going to happen. But I think we all just understood that, right? We're representing so many women out here, and all these eyes are on us. And if we want to have an opportunity to play professional basketball here in the States and make a living at it, we got to go out and represent and do what we can do. And I think that was the ultimate goal for all of us, was one, to win the gold medal, because anything less than that was considered a failure, honestly. And then to open people's eyes to how great women's basketball really is. And I just felt very fortunate and very blessed to be able to be a part of that, and to say that I was a part of helping start the WNBA.
So do you believe back then that, and maybe even let's look at today, that women's sports or women's basketball in particular aren't highlighted as much as maybe the men's, sports could be?
Well, I mean, not just basketball. I think that's any women's sports that's out there. But so I'll go with back then in '96 in Atlanta. I do think the game has grown, but I think in '96 we really weren't so worried about how we're compared to the men, right? Because the men were in Atlanta at the same time we were the dream team, and our goal was, let's do what we can do to open people's eyes to who we are, what we represent, and how good we are. So that was our focus then. And when I look at where we are today and how far the game has come today, do I think the women's game deserves more attention? I absolutely do. But I'm one of those people that believes you worry about the things you can control, and the things you can't, you don't worry about. So to me, what we have to continue to do, and that's current players, that's former players, we have to continue to market the game and talk about the game and keep the game out there. And I think it's up to every individual to do your part, good, bad, and everything in between. You have to do your part to continue to market the game and keep the game out there. To me, what I think people tend to forget is it took years for the NBA to get to where it is today. It didn't just happen overnight. And now when you look at the WNBA, they're in their 22nd, going into their 23rd season. And the fact that we're sitting here saying 23 years, I think is great, because there were a lot of people that didn't think it would be around that long. So is there room for growth? Absolutely. But, to me, I just feel very grateful that the league is still around, and that I was able to play in the league and be so successful for 15 years.
And that is a long time in any kind of professional sport without being, injured and being put out. So the WNBA, 96, and then I think you went to the Olympics in 2000 and then 2004.
In 2004,
correct?
I did.
Okay, so in the midst of all the gold medal winning you was doing, because you was awesome at basketball, obviously, what did David Stern start talking about the WNBA?
So after the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, I actually had a conversation with Val Ackerman, and Val Ackerman was the first president of the WNBA. So in my conversation that I had with Val, she didn't say, Sheryl, the WNBA is going to start. But what she did say to me was, we're talking with the NBA. David Stern is pretty serious about starting a women's professional league here in the States, and we would love for you to be the first player to sign with the WNBA. And the reason why she had that conversation with me was because there was another league, the ABL, that actually started before the WNBA. So the players in the ABL, they played, and it was pretty much the same time frame as the WNBA. So if you signed to play in the ABL, there was no way you could play in the WNBA because they played at the same time. So when I had that conversation with Val and she shared some information with me, to me it was a no-brainer, right? Not that I thought any less of the ABL, but to me, anything that the NBA is going to be behind and support, and I understood how passionate David Stern was about this, I knew it was something I wanted to be a part of. So after that conversation, it was probably a couple of months after that I gotten a call from Val Ackerman and Commissioner Stern. And I flew to New York, signed the contract, and I didn't even believe it was real or it was true until I actually signed my contract to be a part of the WNBA. And here we are 23 years later.
Yeah, so did you just sign to the league, or did you actually sign to the Houston Comets?
So it was different, a little bit different then. When the WNBA started back in '97, you signed with the league. So the first year of the WNBA, it wasn't a draft. They just appointed players to regions and areas that they were from. And with me being from Texas, and at the time, Houston was the only place that had a team in Texas. So I knew that I was going to go to Houston. So I got appointed to Houston. Cynthia Cooper got appointed to Houston. Tina Thompson was actually the first player that was in an actual draft. And that's a lot of things that I don't think people realize that when it first started, the first year we didn't have a draft. So I signed with the league, got appointed to the Comets. And that's changed a lot since 1997 though.
So, and you won 4 championships with the Houston Comets.
We won the first 4 championships.
First 4. So, were people saying that? How is it they dominating this league? I mean, what were people saying about that?
I mean, it's hard to win a championship, period. And honestly, and I don't care if it's men or women, it's hard to win a championship. And then to come back and repeat and then come back and win again and again. To me, it takes it. I don't talk about it a lot, but to me, it takes some special people and talent and character for that to happen. So, you know, there were a lot of people, I think the first couple of years, that felt like it was a little unfair that we were winning championships. And to me, I kind of laughed at that because the Comets, we did the same thing that every other team did. The crazy thing is that when I got appointed to the Houston Comets, I actually was pregnant that first year. So I didn't even really play the first year with the Comets. And Cynthia Cooper had been playing overseas. So a lot of people here in the States had heard of her name, but never really saw her play. So they didn't really have a clue how good she was. And then Tina was the player that we drafted. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about how I can see how people would say, well, that's so unfair, right? And then Tina got drafted. So after I have my son, about 7 weeks later, I come back, was not in shape, but I came back and I was a part of the first season. But I think what people, like you hear people talk about the big 3 with the Comets, myself, Coop, and Tina. But I think people fail to realize that, yeah, we were good and we did our parts, but every single player we had on that team understood what their role was. And you know, when I sit here and I think about Kim Perrott, who didn't get drafted, who had to pay her own way to come and try out for the Comets, and Coach Chancellor didn't want her. He ended up signing her. And I talk about her because to me, Kim Perrott was a huge part of the first 2-3 championships that we won. And then Jeanette Arcane, who's from Brazil. And like we had so many players on that team that people don't necessarily talk about. But honestly, to me, if we wouldn't have had those role players, I'm not so sure that we would have won 4 championships in a row. So,
you know, when you was winning, did you and Michael Jordan have conversations about that?
We didn't have conversations about when we were winning. I actually, the very first time I met Michael Jordan was after the 96 Olympics. And I got an opportunity to go work his basketball camp. No, I take that back. It was after the Final Four. We won the Final Four at Texas Tech in 1993. And I got an opportunity to go work his basketball camp. And I remember being at his basketball camp, and he walked in the gym, and he had over 500 little kids, campers there. And he reached out to my agent, invited me to come work his camp. And I remember he walked in the gym, and myself, along with everyone else who's working the camp, the other workers were standing there, and I had never met him before, but I had always been a fan of Michael Jordan growing up. Watched him play and just really appreciated his talent. So he's walking in, and we hear all these kids screaming, so we turn, and we're all like, that must be him. So he walks in, and we turn, and they're screaming, and I just was like, that's really Michael Jordan. So I remember he came in, he stood in the middle of his campers, and out of nowhere he said, "Where's Sheryl Swoopes?" Now, to me, in my mind, I'm saying, like, that's Michael Jordan. Like, how does Michael Jordan know me? How does he know my name? So one of the workers that was standing next to me was like, "That's you, like, raise your hand." And I didn't know if I should say something, not say anything. So I raised my hand, and he called me out to the middle of the floor. And he said, "Hey, I watched you play the Final Four, and I got to admit, you're pretty good." Now I'm feeling pretty good about myself because Michael Jordan's paying me a compliment saying that I'm pretty good. So then he said, well, you know, a lot of people are saying you're the female Michael Jordan. And he said, so how about a game of one-on-one? And all of his campers are sitting there and they're screaming, yelling, saying, yeah, you guys should play. And I just kind of looked at him and said, I've never compared myself to you. Because now I'm thinking, he's thinking that I think I'm really good, right? Mm-hmm. So we ended up playing a game of one-on-one. The first 3 shots I took were all air balls. So the kids are laughing at me. And so then after a while, my pride started setting in. And I just said to myself, like, it's just Michael Jordan. Like, just calm down. It's just Michael Jordan. So we played to 7. And he actually, I hate saying it, but he actually won. It was 7-4, I think. But it was, to me, it was such an incredible moment for me to be able to be in the presence of someone that to me was the best that ever played the game during my time, and to have an opportunity to share that moment with him and appreciate him appreciating the talent that I had. So it was a pretty special moment for me.
That's, I mean, just to hear you talk about that, because, you know, like for me, I grew up watching Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You see these kids today, they in lines buying Jordans. I'm like, y'all didn't even see him play. And that's always definitely interesting to me. You know, you hear you say, well, at least you scored against him. You could not score.
After my first 3 air balls, I had to redeem myself.
Right. So you know, you went along, and like you said, that's kind of, you know, relationship. Maybe you guys were cool over the years, mm-hmm. or, you know, say, hey, Mike, you know, like, but, you know, you had told me a story about your first Nikes. And some people may not know this story, but how did you get your Nikes?
So I think you keep trying to find stories to make me cry, but I'm tough. I'm not going to do it. So when Nike approached me about doing a women's basketball shoe, it was back in 90, after I graduated in 93, so 94. And Nike approached me. I signed my first Nike contract. And they approached me about a women's basketball shoe. And it was a conversation of, you know, when you wear women's basketball shoes, what do you look for? And I couldn't answer that question because there were no women's basketball shoes. Every shoe I wore, it was a men's basketball shoe. Whether that was Jordans or, I can't even, in college I wore ponies, so I didn't even know what Nikes were, you know? But when they approached me with it, they said, what do you want in a women's basketball shoe? So I expressed to them the things that were important to me. One, I wanted it to be light. I didn't like wearing shoes that were really heavy. When you're running, they're heavy. So something that was light, had really good ankle support because my ankles were really weak, and a shoe that looked good. Like I don't like all the flash and all the fancy colors. I'm very simple. So those were some of the things that I talked to them about. And so they said to me, well, we're thinking about designing a women's basketball shoe. And I got excited about that and said, yeah, like, I think that's a great idea. There's so many women out there that would love that. So many young girls out there that now will have that opportunity to wear a women's basketball shoe. So I was excited about that. And then they said, and we're thinking about naming it after you. And I heard that, but it didn't really sink in. So they said, we want to call it the Nike Air Swoopes. How do you feel about that? I was silent for a minute, and then I got emotional. And then it was one of those things where I said, this can't actually be happening to me, right? I go back and I think about, you know, where I grew up and hearing all the things that people had to say about what I couldn't do for whatever reason. And now I'm in a place where I've won a national championship. I've won an Olympic gold medal, having a conversation with Nike about a women's basketball shoe, and it's a shoe that they want to name after me. That was surreal. That was such a surreal moment because I had never had an opportunity to walk into a store and say, I want to buy a women's basketball shoe. But now my thought honestly wasn't so much about, oh my God, this is great for me. My thought was, this is great for female athletes, not just basketball players, but this is great for female athletes. And it's also great for these young girls out there who want to play basketball. And now they have an opportunity to say, you know, when they walk in a store, they don't have to ask for the Air Jordan. They can walk in a store and ask for the Air Swoopes, or just an opportunity to wear a women's basketball shoe. And to me, it was moments like that where I kind of realized that this game is bigger than just me, right? There's so many opportunities out there for women. And I just kind of felt like this was just a company such as Nike opening the door saying, we believe in you, we believe in women, and this is our commitment to show you how much we want to see you guys succeed. And even to this day, there are times when I can't believe that really truly happened to me, but I do. I feel like it was my responsibility, and it continues to be my responsibility to be that person that people can look at and say, if these things could happen to her, they absolutely can happen to me.
But you did earn all that, though. That's the thing. Nobody just gave you anything. I mean, you put in the work, you won the championships, the gold medals. So it was kind of like a no-brainer, you know, to give you probably that opportunity.
Well, I mean, I absolutely will sit here and say I worked my ass off for all of it. Because there was never a time when I just said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Basketball, I don't like to say basketball was my life, but it pretty much was my life. That's what I wanted to do. I lived, I breathed, I slept basketball. And I always wanted to be that person that some little girl out there could look at me and say, wow, like, look at where Sheryl Swoopes came from. Because sometimes I think people, they get this idea in their heads that athletes, celebrities, superstars, or whatever, that their lives are easy, that the journey is easy. And I like for people to look at me and say, but her journey wasn't easy, because it wasn't. You know, there were so many obstacles and so many things I had along the way that at any moment, if I would have made the wrong decision or made, you know, the wrong turn, my life would be totally different today. So I think there are so many little girls out there that need to see that and need to understand that, you know, it wasn't easy, but if you stay on that path and you keep working hard and you keep believing and you keep fighting, not only can these things happen to you, but I think there are so many more opportunities that they have today than even I had when I was growing up.
So after that great career and all these things happen, you start getting even more honors. Could you tell us about the Hall of Fame? Because not too many people make it there either. You made it to 2 different Hall of Fames, correct?
I did. So I got inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in 2017, which was a special honor for me. But the one, honestly, of everything I have achieved and accomplished and all of the awards, when people ask me which one means more to me, I think that's such an unfair question, because they all have significant meaning at different parts in my life. But I can sit here today and say to you that the Naismith Hall of Fame is absolutely the most special award to me. And for a couple of different reasons. The first is the Naismith Hall of Fame. It doesn't matter men, women, it's the Naismith Hall of Fame. And if you're deserving of it, then you're going into the Hall of Fame. And when you have people like Dr. J, Michael Jordan, on the women's side, Cheryl Miller, there's so many incredible athletes who came before me that are in the Hall of Fame, and we're a big Hall of Fame family. So to me, to be in the Naismith Hall of Fame is, I look at that and say, my life has come full circle. And what I mean by that is I started playing when I was 7, a little girl from Brownfield, Texas with 2 little pigtails, and had no idea what I was going to do in my life, knew what I thought I wanted to do. And then to be inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame in 2016, and to be able to share such an incredible honor and moment with my family, my son, my husband, my mom. That was the last trip and last moment I really kind of spent with my mom before she passed away. So I always hoped that she would be able to see that, because it wasn't just about me and all the work I put in, but I wanted her to see how her little girl, who grew up 7 years old playing basketball, and hearing her tell me so many times that you shouldn't be doing that, that's a boy's sport, and wanted me to come inside. So for her to be able to share that moment with me and see me get inducted into the Hall of Fame and see all of my hard work pay off, that's why I say that one absolutely by far is the most special award to me.
So after all of that, all the winning and playing and the life was basketball, it gets to a point in your life that okay, now it's time for you to walk away from it. How do you go from that life to just, I got to transition? I mean, how did that work for you?
Well, you know, it's hard transitioning from, and I think I could probably speak for a lot of people who just in the working world. Whenever you're so used to doing something, it's something you've done your entire life. For me, it was basketball from the age of 7 until the age of 45. It was basketball, you know, from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, my life was basketball. So transitioning and trying to figure out like, what do I do now? Where do I go now? It's tough. And I think it could also be scary if you're not prepared for it. And I never wanted to be that athlete that would retire and then regret it and say, oh, but I still have 2 years left in me, and then retire and then come back and you're not the same and then retire again. I always said that when I retired from the game of basketball, I wanted it to be on my terms, meaning I didn't want it to be because I got cut from a team or somebody just said, you're done, you shouldn't play anymore. To me, the reason why I played basketball was, one, it was fun. And once I became a professional, it was always fun to me. There was always a challenge there for me. There was always competition there. And I always felt like there's something else I can achieve. So I knew when it had gotten to a point where every day when I woke up, it wasn't fun anymore. It had gotten to a point where now it felt like a job. And I was just like, I don't want to go do this today. So it wasn't fun to me anymore. And to be very honest with you, I accomplished everything I ever set out to accomplish as a basketball player and then some. Even today, I could sit here and say, I can't believe that I actually achieved a lot of these things and won a lot of these awards because I never saw that coming. So there was no longer a challenge there for me. It wasn't fun anymore. So I knew at that point it was time for me to walk away. And I wanted to walk away with no regrets. So when I retired, I knew I was done and I knew it was time for me to move on. I always try to think about what difference am I making? Like I knew the difference I was making as a basketball player in these young girls' lives. So even today, now that I'm no longer a basketball player, I try to find that burning passion and desire that I have inside and say, what is it? How am I making a difference? What do I want my legacy to be besides a basketball player? And I'll be very honest with you, I don't think God put me on this earth to be a basketball player. I think God put me on this earth to use basketball as a platform to get people to see me and to listen to me. But there's something much bigger that He has planned for me. And there's also something bigger that I want to be able to do, and I want to be able to leave to all the young kids that are out there watching me. So
I'm glad you mentioned that. Your shirt. Love the logo, said back to our roots. Now, could you explain people about back to our roots? We see the African continent.
Yeah.
And, hey, we definitely
I'm glad
support
you
the
understand
African
that.
continent. Oh, yes. We definitely see the African continent and the basketball and the hands. So explain that logo and what you're trying to do with that.
So, all right, you asked me a lot of questions in there. So first of all, I'm going to give my brother credit. My brother designed the logo. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I wanted to have basketball tied to it in some capacity because, again, I think that's how people really relate to who Sheryl Swoopes is as a basketball player. So it was important to me that I had basketball in the logo somewhere. And then we'll get to the continent of Africa in a minute. And the hands. So to me, the hands are symbolizing myself and us, the older generation, kind of holding up the continent of Africa and wanting to teach the younger kids about our history and our heritage. So what Back to Our Roots is it's a nonprofit organization that is focused on teaching our young kids and educating them and empowering them about who they are. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like today there are so many young kids out there who have no idea who they are. And they're curious about who they are, where they come from. And to me, it's important that we teach them, as well as ourselves, about our heritage, our ancestry, where we come from, who we really are. And I want to be able to show our youth how important they are, how powerful they are, that they do mean something, that they are important. So through Back to Our Roots, what that program is we're going to go and get a group of teenagers, boys and girls, and help educate them about Africa, right? And teach them who they are. And in that process, we will do DNA testing prior to taking them to Africa, where they will tour a lot of the slave dungeons and just understand who they are. I think it's important that we realize what our ancestors did for us, who our ancestors were. And I personally have a very strong connection to what I want to do with Back to Our Roots, because I have a niece who actually doesn't think she's beautiful enough, doesn't think she's strong enough or good enough. And I want to be able to show them, you are, and this is why you are. You know, because if our ancestors didn't go through the things that they went through for us, you and I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation today. So through Back to Our Roots, my hopes are that we'll be able to educate our youth today on their African ancestry, their heritage, where they come from. And the basketball part will be doing basketball camps and basketball clinics throughout the entire continent of Africa, not just one particular part, but throughout the continent of Africa. And then when we come back, I want to be able to, I guess for lack of a better word, kind of bridge the gap between our African American kids and the African kids, in hopes that they will find some type of a connection while we're there and continue to keep that connection once they get back here in the States.
So you mentioned as part of the program, you mentioned a DNA test. So what is a DNA test for?
So I did my DNA test to understand where my ancestors come from. And I want our youth, right? So when we do the DNA testing for them, I want them to be able to see where they come from, where their ancestors come from. So my DNA testing personally is 44% Cameroon, Congo, 30% Benin, Togo. And so when I say that, that means that's where my blood's from, that's where my ancestors are from. And I just don't think enough of our youth, our kids, understand. Some may not even understand what their DNA is, right? So I don't think they truly understand or know enough about their ancestral heritage to be able to say, well, my DNA shows that I am from this part of Africa or this part of Africa. And to me, I think it's important that they understand that, so that hopefully that can help them understand why they are who they are and why they are the way they are. Because I have slowly figured out, for me personally, why I do certain things the way I do it, based off of where my ancestral DNA says I'm from.
So the DNA part, which is awesome because I've done the same thing, but for some parents that may say, I don't know if I want to do that, it would be optional, correct?
Well, to me, I would hope, because it's not something that they will have to pay for. Okay. It will be paid for through the foundation. And I would hope that the parents, as well as the kids, would say, yeah, I do want to do that. But if there's a parent that says, no, I don't want to know, I don't want my child to know, then it's totally optional for them to decide if they want to do it or not.
Okay, so how many kids would you like to take at a time to the African continent, and have you chose, like, maybe, hey, we would like to try this country first or that country, or is it kind of up in the air?
So the first year, we're going to go with 10. And I ultimately want to get it to where we're taking 20 kids, and it would be every summer. So the first summer, it'll be 10, and we're taking them to Ghana. So I'll tell you, the process will be, I initially thought about having them write an essay, right? But I had this great guy say to me, well, kids don't really want to write essays today, right? So we're probably going to do a video. And what the video will be is, I just want the kids to sit and talk to me and tell me what they know about Africa, whether that's from stuff they've heard from their parents, stuff they were taught in school. And then I want them to say, this is what I know about Africa, but this is why I want to go to Africa. So the process would be, those kids that we're going to choose will be kids that actually are excited about going to Africa. They want to go to Africa. They want to learn about Africa. They want to learn their ancestral DNA. So once we've chosen the 10 from the videos, then the process will start with the DNA. We travel to Africa. Those kids will then help us do the basketball camps that we'll be doing for boys and girls. And you know, my hopes will be, I know that we can't change everybody and we can't save everybody. But for me, being a mom of a 22-year-old son, my hopes would be that after we go to Africa and they get and it'll be about a week, right? So, but just being there in a week, my hopes will be that that would change their perception of who they are, of where they come from, and be able to bring that back and share the knowledge that they got and share the experience that they had. And hopefully we'll want to be able to go back and carry that on and spread the word about this is who I am and this is where I come from, and just be very grateful and thankful that they got that opportunity to share that moment.
Yeah, for me, and as I told many people before, you know, things for me changed when I got to Ethiopia, and it's like when you get on the ground, you know, it do change you. There's nothing nobody can tell you. You have to experience it, and that's good that you want to take kids, you know, to the continent, because they're not being taught anything in school related to the continent other than, okay, you came in as a slave, okay, Martin Luther King, and all right, you know, so they leave a lot of gaps for our children.
Well, and I think our kids they're being done a disservice,
yes.
right? Because the reality of slavery and where we come from and how it all started, it's not being taught. So our kids today, even again, my son's 22 years old, and he probably couldn't sit here and talk to you about what he knows about slavery and where he comes from. But I think it's important when you look at where we are today as a society. It's unfortunate that, you know, one day you walk outside, you may not come back home. If you are a black man, that's the reality of the world we live in today. So I would love to be able to take a group of young black men, young black women back home to the motherland, and hopefully just give them a sense of greatness, right? Because that's where we come from. And I think it's important that because we're here, they're being taught one thing, and they're being brainwashed about this is who you really are. Mm-hmm. So to be able to take them back home and have them go on this week-long journey about the history of Africa, the history of slavery, the history of where we come from. I would hope, and I don't know, you know, but I would hope that would be able, when they come back, that they will have a completely different perception and idea and perspective of who they really are. And, you know, I feel like that's my part. That's what I'm passionate about. And not only is it good for them, but it's good for me to be able to understand where I come from as well, but to feel like I'm making a difference in our youth. And I'm being able to pass something along to them that wasn't passed on to me. I just feel like that's where I'm at in my journey in life right now, and that's what God has put on my heart to do, and that's why we're doing Back to Our Roots.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing, because, you know, I remember just when our trip that just finished with Kenya, and mm-hmm. the people came and they hear and say, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I come? So you taking kids, that means they're going to do it a lot sooner, and they be able to see some things a lot sooner, and that is an awesome thing. You know, you have passion for something. I'm a firm believer that if the passion is there, you're burning with it, yeah. then that's the direction that you should go.
Well, you know, when I'm 48 years old now, when I think about Back to Our Roots and working with the youth, like I never, when I was 18, 19, I never thought about, oh, this is why I should go to Africa. I never thought about that. And now that I'm 48 years old, I know that this is what I want to do and this is where I want to go. So I would be willing to bet that there are teenagers out there who are probably feeling and thinking the same thing that I was. And to me, it doesn't take a lot for us to get together and just have a conversation and talk about, why is this important? Because I know why it's important to me, but I can't make it be important to you if it's not something that you want to be a part of. So I also believe that basketball, and I go back to basketball because basketball's been a part of my life. I believe that basketball is a way to bring the world together at times, right? So basketball is basketball. I don't care what country you're from. I don't care what race you are. Basketball is basketball. Mm-hmm. So to be able to take a global sport, because basketball is a global sport, to Africa and have these teenagers work with these African kids. Hopefully it's a way for them to bond together. So the American kids are being able to teach the African kids something, and the African kids can teach the American kids something, and hopefully they'll develop a bond.
So Sheryl, how can people get to that Back to Your Roots website? Because some people may see it and they may say, hey, I'd like to go check that out, or I want to be a part of that.
Oh, good question. So for anybody that's interested, the website is BTOR, Back to Our Roots, but it's BTOR22.com. And our newly launched YouTube channel is Back to Our Roots.
So Sheryl, I definitely want to thank you for this conversation. I have learned a lot about you in this conversation. And, you know, the thing is, you come definitely from a long way, like a lot of us. But you made it. You became a champion. Now you're moving to the next chapter of your life where you're going to be taking kids and giving them the inspiration to go down that path. And that is something that, you know, I'm definitely, you know, grateful for you doing. And it definitely aligns with what we do. We've tried to connect the diaspora together. You know, we have that void that's missing, you know, within us. I mean, you know, I know you feel it as much as I felt it. But when I got to the continent, it was like filled up. So for the kids to go at a young age and you having that passion and desire, that is a beautiful thing. So we definitely, you know, thank you for even trying to do that.
Well, I first of all appreciate you for taking the time to have me, and I am also a fan of your work. I think what you're doing is great as well, and hopefully we'll be able to, you know, come together and do some great things for the continent of Africa.
Oh yes, and ladies and gentlemen, you know, I'm just going to admit, I'm admitting it publicly. You know, I used to watch Sheryl all the time. So when I saw her come out the first time, I was like, oh my God, it's Sheryl Swoopes. But let me not act like a fanboy for a minute. Let me just kind of be a professional. So I'm admitting it to her. You know,
I thought you handled it well. I couldn't tell.
You have to be professional at times, but you know, hey, I see people just as much as you guys see people. So Sheryl, like I say, once again, thank you for taking up time with us. You know, I greatly, you know, appreciate talking with you, and yes, I'm definitely looking forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.